walk you through a little bit of how GitHub uses GitHub to build GitHub. And yes, that is a lot of GitHubs. And it's a little bit of a running joke internally that you actually have to type GitHub 3 times to get to the monolith, github.com/github/github. But the point of our time today is really for us to show you how to build on GitHub securely and navigate some of the most common pain points so that you can apply how we're doing things and use them to improve your own development experience on GitHub. So just to level set, I think we've all got a lot of the same challenges, and we probably have some of the same challenges that each of you are dealing with on a day-to-day basis. Whether you're innovating and building new things, you're going to have bugs, feature requests, support escalations, you name it. And we've all got to keep track of all of that stuff. And we have to do that at scale, and we do it on GitHub. Now, everyone also wants to see their ideas in the hands of their customers as soon as possible. And our devs, like you, care a lot about how fast changes actually show up in production. And because of that, we literally ship hundreds of times a day. And we also know that mainstream security threats are more prevalent than ever. Whether you're worried about sophisticated criminal syndicates or you're just trying to keep those dependencies up to date, we're thinking about that stuff too. We also have to invest a lot of time and energy into making sure that we are safely and securely building GitHub on GitHub. Now, do those things sound familiar? Okay, I bet that they're top of mind for a lot of you as well. Here's the good news. Whether you're on your first commit of the next big thing, or you're operating a big global platform like we are, you can do that on GitHub. And we want to share some of what we've learned with all of you today. Now, first off, I mentioned deployment frequency. I'll say it, deployment can be really hard to get right. And on industry average, what we find is that most teams deploy between about once a week and a few times a day. But at GitHub, over the course of the last year, we ran more than 80,000 production deployments across all the applications that power GitHub services. That's more than 200 deployments each day. And even at that scale, it's the same set of fundamental challenges to make sure that shipping that frequently doesn't come at the expense of availability and other things that we care about, like quality and security. Then think about things like how many commits. That's obviously an incredibly important part of our day, too. For us, obviously, we think about that as sort of the kernel of how we represent a unit of work in Git terms. And in the last year, inside GitHub, we've had more than 1.9 million commits across all of our internal repositories. That's just a ton of branches, pull requests, commits, issues, and more. And finally, thinking about running a system like GitHub at scale is top of mind for us. And we think a lot about availability and how to make sure that using GitHub is just a great experience for everybody who's relying on our code. And each day, to give you an idea of that scale, GitHub processes more than 4.3 billion API requests. Yes, that's billion with a B. Okay, and that's an average of more than 50,000 requests per second, and peaks are 2 to 3 times higher than that. The reason I share this with you is to prove a point. No matter the size or scale or stage that you and your organization are in, we're all dealing with a lot of those same questions. And the most common themes that I hear across conversations with developers and customers are really centered around 3 things: productivity, collaboration, and security. So today, I'm going to walk you through a little bit of how we use our own products to make sure that being a developer at GitHub is awesome in each of those categories. And you'll be able to leave here with some tips that I hope will help you ship faster, have happier developers, and ultimately operate and build from here on GitHub like we do. So going to the first of those 3 areas, let's start talking about productivity. For us, the 2 biggest game changers of the last few years have been adopting CodeSpaces and Copilot. These are 2 amazing proof points of why we are absolutely convinced that development is moving to the cloud, and we know it because we're already there and we're living it every day. First, with CodeSpaces, a little bit of context. You know, truthfully, local development hasn't actually changed that much in the last 10 years. If you're new in your job, you get a laptop, you follow a litany of instructions, you're installing plugins, getting your dot files, building dependencies, And if everything goes right and the planets and the stars are lined up in a particular fashion, you'll get a working build environment on the first try. And maybe your documentation is really good and it helps you with that. But what about later on when a change clobbers your local build environment? In some of those cases, and this was the case at GitHub for a long time, that meant you had to start all over. You had hours of productivity lost, or maybe you're just going to rage rm-rf those local clones in frustration. So we're talking hours sometimes before your first commit, maybe more hours if you have to rebuild from scratch. And that's just more time wasted to rebuild that local setup. Does this sound familiar to anybody out there? I see a lot of nodding heads in the audience here. So speaking from our own experience, let's look at the GitHub repo, which is where most of what you experience on github.com lives. That repo is about 18 gigs on disk, meaning you're looking at maybe a good 20 minutes to check that out locally on a good connection. Then you've got more time building dependencies and getting you set up to get to your first commit. Now with CodeSpaces, and you're going to see this in a minute, 2 clicks and 60 seconds later, you're in a working, running build environment that's running on faster hardware than the MacBook I use every day. Building locally used to take 45 minutes to go from a checkout to a built local development environment, but now you're looking at less than 1 minute with GitHub CodeSpaces. It's a huge difference, and I can also throw it away and start over in seconds if I need to. Local development also has other challenges too, and the one that comes to mind for me is thinking about traditional endpoint security challenges. Who amongst us has not felt the pain of hearing the fans spin up on your laptop and everything grinds to a halt as your build process competes with the endpoint security agent for those precious, scarce cores on your machine? We also know there's other local soft spots as well with local development. And if you're an adversary thinking about targeting the software supply chain, they might compromise your local machine, inject backdoors, other malicious code into your local branch, hoping you'll unwittingly commit that back up to main and eventually deploy that to production. These are real challenges and real reasons why we moved to CodeSpaces. It's faster than any commodity hardware that we can buy for our developers. We don't have to worry about local environment constraints like CPU architecture or memory, and we're abstracting away a ton of local attack surface for our developers. Now, if you're like me and you live in the Midwest, sometimes heating your home office with a local build can be a nice thing to do, but that is a thing of the past moving forward with moving development to the cloud. The second tool that's had a big change in our day-to-day developer experience has been GitHub Copilot. Now, we've been using this internally for a little over a year, and it still feels like magic to me every day. And my running joke is it isn't just good at writing code, it's also pretty good at writing OKRs and conference talks too. Now, magic sounds cool, but like how good is it actually? Well, don't take my word for it on our internal experience. We did recently publish a study that looked at Copilot performance across 2 groups of developers, one who used Copilot, one who didn't. Hopefully not surprising to learn that Copilot was able to complete the same, users with Copilot were able to complete the same task 55% faster than the group that didn't have Copilot. Now, getting the job done faster is great, and how many engineering managers out there perked up at hearing about productivity gains? Some of you. But it's not just faster. Developers are telling us it is a better experience across a number of other dimensions. In fact, 3/4 of developers that we spoke to said Copilot helped them stay in the flow and spend more time focusing on the fun parts of their jobs. Think about that for a second. Developers are telling us they're more satisfied with their jobs when they use Copilot. When was the last time you adopted an experience that made you love your job more? It's an incredible example of putting developers first in everything that we do. And if you haven't checked it out, you should, because it's completely changed how we build here at GitHub. Now, I'd like to invite April Leonard on stage to show you how we use CodeSpaces and Copilot to build GitHub today.
Thanks, Mike. We are using these products every day to improve productivity across our teams. CodeSpaces automates repetitive manual steps, checkout, downloading tools and dependencies, even initial build and running tests. And Copilot helps you stay in the flow, avoiding common syntax errors and boilerplate typing. Together, they help our developers focus on what matters, building awesome features for our users. So let's dive right in. So my team works mainly in the Ruby monolith that serves GitHub.com, like we were talking about, GitHub.com, GitHub. So many GitHubs. For every task, we start a code space with a single click right from the code dropdown like this. As Mike shared, CodeSpaces are instant on, customizable, container-based developer environments in the cloud. So spinning up in the background is a powerful machine that will run GitHub.com and its dependent services. My default editor is set to VS Code Desktop, so for my daily work, I launch directly into my preferred tools. And the experience is customized with my themes, extensions, and dot files. Let's make this like a little bigger. Actually, I can just go like this. There we go. OK. And Config as Code makes this all possible by defining your project's developer environment right next to your code, so everyone gets the same experience every time. And with pre-builds, you can offload common setup like running build and tests. It's like continuous integration, but for your developer environment. And it makes startup blazing fast. So here, I'll just make this a little bit bigger so everybody can see. All right. So we're going to finish up installing my dot files, and then we'll get a welcome message, and then we'll be all set and ready to go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and start the server, but we won't just run the website just yet. So script server, there we go. And we'll cancel that out. OK, so while the server gets running, I'm just going to go ahead and hide this, and we're going to actually peek at the configuration that makes this possible, the dev container JSON file. So right here in the top left from our folder, we'll select dev container JSON, and this is kind of a lot. So I'm not going to go over every line in this file, but this is a pre-configured tool stack that helps you get your environment set up and ready to go. We specify the base image, minimum host requirements. We load default extensions. I'm going to come down here a little bit more. We forward a ton of ports. There's like a lot going on in this project. And we also pre-authenticate access to other repositories. So now anyone on the team can contribute to making sure that every developer gets a great default experience. We all know the struggle of works on my machine. And now with CodeSpaces, it works on every machine every time. Now, some configuration makes sense for everyone, but developers also have their own preferences. I prefer the GitHub Lite theme, which is loaded automatically. And with Settings Sync, I get the material icon, VS Code extension, so I can always see my file type at a glance. And my dot files load tmux. So all I have to do is create a new terminal session. So we'll pop our terminal over here, add a new session, and I can start a new tmux server. I can say tmux server, but I'm going to start a new tmux server. And I'll create a new split window, tmux split window. And I'll just go ahead and start top in one so that I can just have my critical processes wherever I want. But I have access to the terminal right here. So we all have our preferences. So CodeSpaces works with us. Speaking of preferences, like many of you, I'm rarely coding in a single language. And so I switch editors often. And CodeSpaces works with the tools I love. VS Code Desktop, like I'm using here, but from our CodeSpaces dashboard, right here in the top nav, we have access to CodeSpaces. We'll come down here. And this is actually the CodeSpace that we were just working on together. I'll right-click here on the dots, open in, and you can see that I have access to CodeSpaces in the browser, to VS Code Desktop, and now in private preview, we have JetBrains and Jupyter Lab. So if someone on my team prefers RubyMine, all they need to do is launch OpenIn. And with the terminal access through the GitHub CLI, everyone has their preferred editor at their fingertips. But sometimes I'm not just switching tools, but physical locations. And no matter where you are, you can connect to your CodeSpace on your laptop, browser, or tablet. OK, so let's go ahead and make a quick improvement to github.com. So first, we'll go over to the Ports tab, and we will get the web server. There we go. Start a browser. So this is github.com running locally. We'll sign in with our test account. Mona Lisa. There we go. Now, I work on the CodeSpaces team, but I had an interesting idea that I wanted to add an emoji to your team's count on the main dashboard, because I just want to help people see that how they're growing their communities, add a bit of whimsy. So right here on the bottom left corner is your teams count. Now, I could just file an issue with my idea, but I think showing a prototype is way more powerful, so let's get coding. All right, so back here, we're going to open the right file, user teams. And so here's the thing, Ruby isn't my primary coding language. So I'm going to use Copilot heavily to ease the pain of all the syntax errors that I will inevitably introduce into this code. So I can simply write a comment around what I want to achieve. So here's are your teams. And see, there I go. All right, so I'm going to assign an emoji based on teams.count, an integer within a range of 0 to 100. And I think for 0 to 20, let's just assign something like this like cute plant. Awesome. Hey, thank you, Copilot. All right, that's exactly what I wanted. All right, emoji equals, oh yeah. All right, that's feeling good. Okay, I like that. All right, so I'm gonna save that. I'm going to refresh my page. Now, I only have 2 teams. I'm just starting out here. So, I'm expecting on this left nav that I'm gonna get a very small growing plant, and there it is. We have, can you see that? There we go. There it is, yeah. So I'm ready to get some fun new feedback around our team count. All right, well, the only thing is that CodeSpaces are private by default, so but all I have to do is come over here to this visibility, right-click, and I can make this public so that I can just share it with the team right away, or I could just make it private to my organization, which I know my chief security officer really appreciates. So I can safely share this URL with anyone on my team and get real-time feedback. And since CodeSpaces automatically installs all of my favorite tools, I have the GitHub CLI right available here on my command line. So I can go back to a terminal, I can commit my change, and I can just do a GHPR, and I'm ready to go. All right, onboarding new hubbers used to take days. And with CodeSpaces, it takes seconds to spin up a new, secure, powerful, one-click environment. It's kind of like GitStash, but for your entire laptop. And now CodeSpaces is available to everyone with up to 60 hours of free usage. Copilot and CodeSpaces help me stay in the flow and focus on building what matters, improving the developer experience for my team and all of us at GitHub. So I'm excited how it can help you too.
All right, thanks, April. That was great. I think it's fair to say that going all in on cloud has been awesome for developers inside GitHub. It is more fun, it's faster, you're more engaged, you're working on the more interesting and more challenging work because you can spend less time on the boilerplate and more time on the creative part of your job. We think moving to cloud and AI-driven development is going to be the future of software development, and that's why we're living it internally today. Now I want to shift gears to the next piece, which is collaboration. And CodeSpaces and Copilot are just 2 of the many tools that we use. In fact, we dog food really everything that we build. And what we're doing is making sure that we're creating the best experience, not just for our own developers, but making sure that it's the best that it can be once it gets into your hands. And one of the challenges that we think a lot about internally is discoverability, meaning how can you find what you need when you need it, because it has huge implications for how teams think in terms of how they collaborate together as groups. And at GitHub, we're remote first, and we have highly distributed teams. So we have to be super intentional about how we keep teams up to date across our work and make it easy to find what we need to get the job done. And that's where we think things like issues and projects really come into play. It helps teams without any additional reporting overhead, linking the pieces together between what they're doing in the places that they're doing it into an easy-to-use view of easy-to-use macro view of the project. Now, to give you an example, actually, GitHub's security team was one of the first adopters of the new GitHub projects inside the company, using issues to track and deliver on their OKRs and major projects. That team consists of developers, analysts, security researchers, and a whole bunch of other teams. And really, for us, it was about having an easy way to think about the tactical initiatives and how they fit together into the bigger picture, connecting people to the work, from the work that they're doing to the mission that we have as a company. And that actually makes it easier for us to not only track work and drill down into an individual or single task, but you feel it when you have that connection and that you know how your work actually contributes to the whole and really that broader mission of supporting our customers. And I can't stress to you enough how much this increased and improved our culture of information flow. So that's how we organize the big picture around issues and projects. But what about the more tactical discovery of that file or that function or that new feature that you heard about at the water cooler that another team is building and you need to track down? Well, do you know that feeling of despair that you get when you're in the flow? And it's like you're looking for that needle in the haystack, in the field full of haystacks, and you just can't find what you need? I mean, I know it. I hear some chuckling, which I think means some of you know it too. Yeah, I think we've all been there. This is super frustrating to be spending time hunting for things and knowing they're there but not being able to find them. Not only is this frustrating, but it actually has the extra implication of you're getting out of the ideal flow state. And it has even more global implications because you're trying to find something instead of thinking about how does the work I'm doing fit into that bigger picture. This is part of why we're constantly improving things like the new code search and code view. And the goal here is not only to make sure that it's easier to see the big picture, but also easier to find that small thing so that you can stay in the flow. And I'll give you an example. The GitHub monolith that April showed a few minutes ago is about 15 years old. And in many cases, Hubbers need to find code that was written long before they joined the company. That can be really time-consuming if you're not sure where that is to have to navigate and try to locate that. We've been using the new code search and code view internally for some time now, and let me tell you, it is super satisfying to be able to find what you need quickly and just keep going with your work. You know that feeling of achievement that you get when you're working on a puzzle and you find that last piece that's been missing in the house and you've been searching for high and low for days? It is super satisfying. This happens to me all the time. I have 8 kids in my house, so we're constantly losing puzzle pieces. So to give you an example of how you can have that experience with the new code search, I'm going to invite Omar Ben Sadin onto the stage, and he's going to show you how we're adopting some of these features across GitHub.
Thanks, Mike, and hello, universe. As you know, we're working to be the home for all developers, and that also means being the home for all development processes, from solo devs to open source projects to enterprise software teams. And the teams at GitHub are no different. Projects and issues are the heart of planning and tracking on GitHub. We use these tools so that we can easily track work across the company. But how do teams like mine at GitHub break down our work into manageable tasks? Well, for my team, it all starts here, the board view. We break down and organize chunks of work, which we call batches, you can see in the first column, into manageable tasks for developers to pick up in the second column. Until now, we related these batches and tasks in lots of hacky ways. Labels, custom text fields, or a slew of other half fixes. But we didn't have the right solution. We needed the ability to create a more complex hierarchy of issues and view those hierarchies across repos or even organizations. We wanted to decompose things like roadmap items into epics and epics into stories, and then slice and dice that hierarchy into different views. Clicking into one of these issues, we'll see that Markdown task lists did come close, but they've always just been a flat list of issues. Well, that is, until today. Our new and improved task lists, which we've been using behind the scenes for a few months now, are a powerful new addition to both GitHub projects and issues. And once it loads, you'll see that the new task list UI shows metadata like labels and assignees along the right side. And the new Omnibar makes it incredibly easy to add new issues to the task list. Take, for example, adding issue number 31, integrate with backend. And under the hood, it's all just Markdown. This means we can quickly decompose work, either from the UI using the Omnibar, or in edit mode, as you see me doing here with the task investigate latency issues. When I save the Markdown, it's reflected in the UI. And then I can easily convert that task into a new issue in my repo. We've also built in a new breadcrumb navigation in projects, which helps us easily explore interconnected issues. So we can easily navigate all the way down and then back up an issue hierarchy, no matter how many levels it contains. That means if you're an SVP of engineering, like Mike, you can click all the way down to the actual feature work without ever leaving your project. We've also tightly integrated task lists with projects, so our team can use new task list-specific fields, powerful filters, and new project views to better understand how their work fits together. Let's enable the new tracks field in our project. Once we do, we can see how many tasks each batch contains, as well as their status. After enabling this field in the View menu, we can see that 2 of the 4 issues and beta integrations have been completed. We can also see the inverse of this relationship, which children belong to which parent, by enabling the tracked by field. And now that we've enabled it, you can see that in our tasks column, each item shows which parent it's tracked by. Our teams also use powerful filters to create new views based on issue hierarchy. For example, we could create a bug bash view, so we can focus on all of the bugs submitted in our alpha using the first batch in our list, general bug fixes from alpha feedback. First, we'll create a new view and name it something like bug bash, and maybe include like a cute caterpillar emoji. And then we'll filter only for issues tracked by our alpha bug batch by typing tracked by and then referencing our issue number, which in this case is 30. Now we can easily see which bugs need to be addressed for beta. We can even take this a step further and get a bird's eye view across all of our batches by grouping using the exact same field. So we'll create a new view, and this time we'll call it grouped by batch. And we'll be able to easily see all of our batches and their respective tasks simply by grouping by the tracked by field. Task lists have streamlined the way our teams break down, organize, and track all of our work, so our developers can spend more time doing what they do best, creating kick-ass software. And speaking of kick-ass software, earlier April showed us a quick look at the GitHub codebase using CodeSpaces. But I want to go a little deeper and show you how we search across that codebase using the new feature Mike mentioned earlier, Code Search. To show you how we do this, I've pulled an actual project board from one of our teams, the repos team. Let's take this bug, for example. It looks like it's related to a React component called ago. Seems like there's a bug in the implementation and we're not rendering a tooltip. But let's say I'm not familiar with this code base. How do I even get started? Well, we'll do a quick search. And to show the power of the new GitHub code search, we're going to search across the entire GitHub code base, an organization which has over 5,000 repos and 2 million files. Searching over this much data in almost any IDE would take minutes. Let's see how long it takes in the new GitHub code search. After we hit enter, you'll see that it takes less than a second. This is This is only possible because we've built the new code search engine completely from scratch with a focus on performance and searching code specifically, so you can find only the most relevant results. Now, on the screen, you can see that there are a few examples of how this component is being used. Let's dig in using the new code view. We've totally redesigned the code view to tightly integrate search, browsing, and code navigation. We can see an example of how the ago component is used simply by clicking on it. In the new symbols pane, we see the definition as well as references to this component across the repository and organization. And we can jump right to where this component is defined by clicking on its definition. And here's the implementation. It looks like the fix will be easy. We'll just need to add a tooltip around lines 51 to 56. Let's put a link to what we found back in the issue to give engineering a head start. Reading and understanding code is an essential task for every developer, especially when working in large and unfamiliar code bases. And like Mike mentioned earlier, this new set of capabilities allows our teams to work within the monolith faster and more efficiently. With Code Search, you'll be able to find the information you need across your entire code base almost instantly. And if you're as excited by these new features as we are, I've got some great news. You can sign up to participate in the beta of both Task Lists and Code Search. Watch till the end for the link. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Omer. I'd love to see how much we're making GitHub more feature-rich in an effort to help developers get straight to what they want and need to work on. And it's clear that good collaboration tools have been a key part of better information flow at GitHub. Now, I want to bring it back to my roots in security. And at the beginning of every company-wide meeting, I typically ask all of our hubbers to raise your hand if you're on the security team. And I want everybody to get them up there. Okay? And every time I do this, every hubber raises their hands because we built a culture where everyone knows just how critical security is to every part of our business and really to each of you who are counting on us. They feel engaged and active in the process of keeping us secure, and they understand that the choices that they make matter immensely to the security of the platform in our business. And my philosophy behind this is that it's really actually that the most important security work is not actually happening exclusively in the security team. It's actually what the security team enables to happen out at the edges each day. And we're trying to make it easier for people to safely and securely get things done while preventing the downside risks from happening. And these concepts are not actually opposing to one another when you take a thoughtful approach to the experience that your developers have every day. And this is actually why I think we are in the midst of a culture shift inside security. Frankly, the industry has not necessarily learned from all of its mistakes. We struggle with many of the same issues that have plagued the security industry for more than a decade. Exposed credentials, just to give you an example, are still the root cause of more than 20% of breaches today. Phishing is still by far the cheapest, easiest way for an adversary to get into an organization and wreak havoc. And we're still pleading with organizations to implement some of the basics like multi-factor authentication. And that's one of the most effective techniques to keep bad actors at bay. But I am here to tell you that I do think there's good news ahead in security. And the closer we can bring security and development teams together, the better the outcomes and security experiences that we can actually create together. And one of the things that I love most about security is that when you do it right, you execute it properly, you're actually empowering teams to go faster and innovate without slowing them down. Think about it like the seatbelt in your car. Seatbelts are not there to slow you down. They're there to keep you safe while you're going fast. And building security into the developer's workflow, not interrupting them from it, with helpful guardrails like this helps actually helps people make smarter and safer decisions faster. So at GitHub, we build security into everything that we do across the developer lifecycle. And this is from how we protect our own hubbers, the GitHub.com platform, and the millions of open source maintainers and customers who use GitHub every single day. Now, I'll tell you about one of my favorite security controls that we use internally to protect our hubbers and our own systems. Maybe you've seen one of these. I'll give you a little contrast with my hand there. But this is a security key. And we use these to make sure that every login at GitHub internally is protected by a strong security policy that enforces that we use FIDO security keys to log in every time and to check out things like just-in-time privileges for more privileged actions and systems and more. And this is the best defense against phishing. And I'm here to tell you that your team can do this too. And it's one of the most important and effective controls you have, not just to prevent account takeover, but also more generally to think about securing your supply chain. Now, at GitHub, we really do think that software supply chain security starts with the developer. And if your developer accounts aren't protected, just know that this is where adversaries will start. If they can take over the account of a popular, or the contributor to a popular open source project, this can actually have disastrous consequences, not just to that project, but to all the downstream consumers of that project. That's why, as we recently did with maintainers of critical packages on the NPM registry, we're actually going to require that every developer who contributes to software on GitHub.com from anywhere will need to use some form of two-factor authentication by the end of next year. Now, two-factor authentication adoption among our daily active users today is just under 20%, which is pretty good relative to other platforms, but we need this number to grow because normalizing that use of strong authentication on platforms like GitHub is the most important thing that we can do, especially as the home of open source on GitHub, to help defend the entire ecosystem from software supply chain attacks. Now, I'd like to invite Xavier René Correll on stage, who leads GitHub Security Lab. He's going to show you some other important ways that we secure GitHub's platform and how we support and work with the open source community.
Thanks, Mike. Hello, GitHub universe. As Mike mentioned, we bake security into everything we do, from our research to our resources and our security products in GitHub Advanced Security. We use secret scanning, Dependabot, and code scanning with CodeQL. I'm going to focus on CodeQL, our semantic code analysis engine that automates security checks, and I will walk you through a few ways we use it to secure GitHub and the broader open source community. The main idea behind CodeQL is that it's driven by a set of open source queries that model many different types of vulnerability patterns across a wide range of programming languages. This way, it acts as a security force multiplier. By capturing one given pattern as a CodeQL query, we can detect all instances of that type of vulnerability across all of our current and future projects. A great example of this is how we leverage CodeQL to detect a common Ruby anti-pattern that could result in an OAuth bypass. The GitHub security teams were looking for misconfigurations in github.com's HTTP verb handling that would bypass intended redirects to our OAuth endpoint. Let's look at the video to understand the vulnerability. So when I send a GET request to github.com, it's being routed correctly to the OAuth endpoint and tell me that I'm not logged in. Any other request should be blocked, like a post request, should be blocked by the built-in Rails CSRF protection and give a 404. It turns out head requests would bypass the protection, still be processed, without going through our OAuth endpoint, telling me that I'm logged in. Not good. The GitHub security team shared this pattern with the CodeQL product team, alongside improvement ideas for the queries, and they came up with this query to detect this anti-pattern on github.com. We then deployed this query on all of GitHub, and code scanning with CodeQL is very easy to set up on your repo as a new GitHub Actions workflow using the GitHub CodeQL action. And we were able to detect and fix all instances of this OAuth bypass across GitHub's code, and also to protect against future instances. What's happening here is that I opened a pull request containing this bug, and CodeQL detected the bug and commented directly into the pull request. This is how we scale the knowledge of our security teams to create checks that are deployed for all our developers. Our developers, not only our developers, we merge these queries into the open source CodeQL queries, and now all CodeQL users can benefit from these additional detections, which includes open source projects that can use CodeQL and GitHub code scanning for free. This kind of vulnerability discovery feedback loop, where vulnerability patterns shared by security teams at GitHub or at our customers end up as CodeQL queries that are then available for everyone, it truly acts like a global force multiplier for security knowledge in the developer and security communities. Now I want to talk about something that is the coolest part of my job. The Security Lab's mission is to build and inspire a community of hackers. It's amazing to work with this community, and it has been from day one of the job when my colleague Kevin exploited a vulnerability in Apple's XNU to remotely shut down my phone. Well, by doing that, he inadvertently shut down all the Apple devices on the floor. And my job is to distill all of this incredible collective security knowledge into this feedback loop, amplify it, scale it into actual security results for everyone. A fantastic example of this community feedback-driven security is the story of Simon Gerst. He had an idea as part of his university studies that ended up helping thousands of organizations. Let me show you a video. Simon is studying cybersecurity in Germany. He was reading a security blog post about an authentication bypass vulnerability in the NHS COVID-19 contact tracing app. This vulnerability is caused by an improper JWT token signature verification. He decided to code this pattern into a CodeQL query. He proposed this query as a submission to our CodeQL bug bounty program. This CodeQL query was merged into our open source repo, and GitHub included it into our standard CodeQL query suite. So when the security lab was auditing GitHub's open source dependencies, we decided to run this query on DataHub. DataHub is a popular open source data catalog solution built by LinkedIn and with other 1,900 forks on GitHub and more than 5 million pulls from Docker Hub. And boom, this new CodeQL query found an authentication bypass. Our query result points to the faulty code with a detailed explanation of the vulnerability and a remediation advice. So when we reported it to the DataHub team, they were able to fix it quickly. And they informed their downstream consumers with a GitHub security advisory. In the end, what started as student research resulted in a fix that improved the security of hundreds of organizations and projects who use DataHub, and in an automated check that protects thousands of Java open source projects for free. Yeah, you can't believe it. I know, this is incredible, but but it's true, that's CodeQL for you. It's unique because it truly leverages the power of community to drive security results at scale directly into the secure development life cycles of maintainers and enterprises. With each CodeQL community contribution, hundreds of thousands of projects across the GitHub ecosystem automatically become more secure. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Xavier. Also, you know not to let your phone get too close to Xavier's team after hearing about his experience. Securing the world's open source code really is a team effort, and it's incredible to see all the ways that the community jumps into. If you can take anything away from this, I hope it's that security shouldn't be about gatekeeping your teams from shipping. It should be about the process and the support that enables them to ship quickly and with confidence. Now, as you can see, GitHub, we have a lot of the same challenges that any other development team out there has. Doesn't matter if you're processing 4.3 billion API requests a day like we are, or if you're just starting on that next idea that's going to be launched into the world. Our goal today was to give you a window into a few of the ways that we use GitHub to build our own platform securely and improve our own developer experiences, not only to be more productive, collaborative, and secure, but really to be more creative, to be happier, and to build the best work of our lives. And I can't wait to see how you put some of this to work to show us what you're building on GitHub. Now, let's build from here together. Thank you.
This all started as a collaborative coding project. The goal was to build a place for every developer and create a home for every great idea. And 15 years later, we've seen things no one expected. I mean, there's a helicopter on Mars. There's a vault storing the world's open source code beneath an Arctic mountain. There's a network of satellites taking pictures of a black hole, and your sources of e-commerce, gaming, streaming, search, social media, and AI were all built right here. And that's not even counting the thousands of groundbreaking startups using GitHub to move from idea to concept to IPO. And countless lives have changed. And every step of the way, GitHub has looked for ways to support developers all over the world by helping them get paid for their contributions, or giving them native AI tools and automation, or by moving software development to the cloud, or providing the most secure environment available. The world's biggest companies and its leading startups rely on GitHub to build great things. And the world we help build is already changing faster than its specs recommend. The only certain way to improve anything is to offer everyone a better place to connect and collaborate. The dev community, wherever they live and wherever they work, are the ones who will lead the way. Because we're not just in this together, we're better together. So let's go make something great. And let's build from here.